Now, I have not done an upload in a few weeks. I need to work through my main one, as it were. So I'm going to have a look through football because I've thought of an idea. I can stick with that. It's relatively simple in theory. So let's give that a go. So this will be Will's weekly football roundup. I'm going to just go through and grade every team's season. The Premier League season is now fully wrapped up. So let's just have a quick look over some of those teams, where they finished, how I'm grading them. So, how I'm grading them, I'm going to go for A for great, B for good, C sort of expected, and D as in poor. And I'm going to start from the bottom up. A lot of these bottom teams are going to be poorly rated, to be perfectly honest. Southampton, Ipswich and Leicester, all Ds, all poor as far as I'm concerned. The main aim for all three of those teams would have been survival. That would have been the goal. And I'd have probably put them up a grade if there was it was closer, but it wasn't even close with these three teams, unfortunately. It's the lowest points total ever from sort of three relegated teams. It's just been a case of 3 up, 3 down. The same teams going up, same teams going down. Now, people can argue whether there's sort of a gap in finances or sort of obvious quality between these teams, whether there has to be some great tactical ingenuity. So, for example, Chris Wilder, when he brought Sheffield United up, it was a case of these overlapping defenders sort of getting forwards, or like Bielsa, sort of old school, just sort of absolute press the hell out of absolutely everybody, and almost needing something, either needing to have a lot of quality to blow teams away, or to balance things out to close the gap, or having a unique tactic or skill which the other teams within the Premier League struggle to adapt to. Southampton didn't really do sort of great deal. I mean, they've got wins against Everton when Everton were poor. Ipswich have, well, unfortunately been pretty poor. Ipswich sort of getting the odd win and sort of points here and there, sort of winning against Spurs, Chelsea, Bournemouth, and sort of showing a lot of fight in sort of games earlier in the season, getting draws against teams like Brighton, against Aston Villa. However, there seems to almost be a fear of inevitability that came around that team, at least in my opinion, sort of a little bit past that Christmas sort of period, when first half of the season sort of games you can see, it's just a bit close, and okay, you can argue VAR decisions could have sort of helped, or every decision could have helped in those situations, but unfortunately, just about every team in the league can sort of argue a shoulda, woulda, coulda when it comes to refereeing decisions. Every team gets done over by refereeing decisions. Sometimes, if you're lucky, these things sort of balance out. Unfortunately, well, if you turn to the lower leagues, they clearly didn't. Leicester City didn't really. I believe the changeovers of the management never really seemed to help them. Maresca, having brought the team up, bringing Cooper a complete change in style and tactics, which maybe if he was sort of kept into the job, Leicester might have got a few more points here and there because of his Premier League experience and ability to grind out and set up a team which can defend. And then you've also then sort of the decision to appoint Ruud van Nistelrooy, which was a bit of a wild card shout, which if it worked would have been amazing, but there was absolutely no guarantees on that, and is a young manager, so needs more time and more experience there. Next up, done those three, we've got Spurs. Spurs is a D. It's poor, it's pants, it's poo-poo. It's absolutely dreadful. You could look at the Europa League success and say, woohoo, yay, but I'm purely looking at all of this from a Premier League perspective. Spurs are a team that should be competing for Champions League, and plain and simply, they haven't. At a certain point, partway through the end, this tail end of the season, you could see the manager having transitioned his team, sort of saying, no, we're going to focus on winning the Europa League. Fair enough, but that doesn't exclude some of the sort of poor games and sort of dropped points in poor positions. Sort of struggling against Leicester opening game of the season, losing at home to Ipswich. It's just, I mean, you can make an argument for injuries, but I'm sorry, the injuries, just like the refereeing decisions, it's not a strong argument to hold with any team here. Every team has them. Every team's got to deal with them. Sometimes you get a bit lucky. Sometimes you get a bit unlucky. You've just got to deal with it, unfortunately. That's a D. That is a poor, poor season. Wolves are a bit of a funny one. Wolves, I mean, first half of the season, they were really, really naff. The managerial change obviously made a great deal of difference, and that Wolves team is actually quite fun and quite good. Arguably dragged through games by the brilliance of Matheus Cunha. But I'll be honest, I don't think I had amazing expectations for Wolves. Like, someone can prove me wrong there. So I'd say that's a C. It's sort of expected. Wasn't really expecting Wolves to break into the top 10 or anything like that. So just a bit average. Man United, after that, that's poor. It's poo-poo. It's naff. Man United are a team that should be competing for Champions League. I don't know whether sort of an issue over the management, the styles, the setup. There is clearly a lot wrong there, and I don't think you could put a pin on one singular thing at Man United. There is a lot there that needs fixing and a lot that needs to be unpackaged there. I don't know. I don't have time to go through every single aspect of Man United because there is a lot. That football club needs a lot of help. It needs a lot of TLC, and so that's very, very poor. West Ham finishing 14th. I don't know. I'm going to put this in poor. West Ham admittedly are a mid-table Premier League team to many people's eyes. They've obviously maybe been punching above their weight, with sort of doing so well in the European competitions and sort of competing for those European places with David Moyes. The decision to sort of bring in Lopetegui, which is one I can actually predict that I actually got right, was going to be a poor one. The notion of whoever wins the transfer window, it seems to be like a curse upon a team. And most people would have argued that West Ham in the summer actually won the transfer window based on what they needed and what they got. So I'm talking about sort of bringing in another striker. Nicholas Fulkrug, who just played in the Champions League final, brilliant. Needed another fullback, Wan-Bissaka, cool, brilliant. Needed some bite in the midfield, Rodriguez, cool, brilliant. A lot of these, and Somerville, for example, who was arguably Championship player of the season last year, I mean, his involvement was minimal. I mean, some of these things you can say, well, there's injuries and so on like that. But when you've built up that level of expectation, you're expecting better. You are very, very much expecting a better performance from West Ham. Everton's a C. I think everything's naturally balanced out fairly well with Everton. They obviously had a bit of a poor time under Dyche. Bringing Moisey back might have actually tactically been an absolute brilliant thing. Someone who knows the club, knows the setup, and can make a mean defence and just tough to beat. Someone who knows the league, knows the squad. He just knows. He's steady. He's reliable, and I think Everton with backing and with a solid base and David Moyes could genuinely, I think, push potentially into top half of the table next season, depending, of course, on transfer business. But I'd say it's as expected. They are a mid-table team. Crystal Palace as well, traditionally finishing exactly the same position every year. What position is that? 12th? Boom, there you have it. It's as expected. It's a C. Obviously did absolutely amazingly to win the FA Cup. They're sort of very much a team which sort of had a season of two halves, as I keep mentioning with some of these things. Crystal Palace were really, really poor first half of the season. But I think since the turn of Christmas, Crystal Palace form-wise would probably be in the Champions League. I don't get it. They were like this last year. That they just seem to be the best second half of the season team in the league. Maybe it's just the ability to just get those results, to be switched on, to not have their heads in the clouds sort of trying to be off at the beach. And I mean, fair play. Fulham, it's a good solid season for Fulham. I think I'm going to put it in good, because I think at times they were sort of encroaching into those European spaces, and they've sort of had a bit of a rebrand and are playing a good style of football, a fun style of football. They're very easy to watch, and I think there's been they've had to do a bit of a turnover with some of their players. Sort of losing Polina, losing Tim Ream, who was sort of at the heart of that Fulham defence, sort of managing to rework that with sort of a Bassi Anderson centre-back partnership, which is actually working so well for them. Sort of top-notch form from Robertson on the left-hand side. And just sort of some fun players. Like, I remember watching Fulham against Ipswich earlier in the season, and I was thinking, I'm really scared anytime Alex Iwobi's on the ball, because he's just he always looks like he's going to make something happen, just everything good. And whatever striker goes up front for Fulham, all can always sort of nick a goal. And they've sort of got Harry Wilson, who can always come off the bench and always seem to score as a sub. He seemed to have a spell sort of earlier in the season where he's just lethal off the bench. So that's absolutely top notch. Brentford, I think in the context of things, I'm going to go good. I'm going to go B for Brentford. Because this is sort of where I think some people... I mean, I expected them to have a massive dip from losing Ivan Toney. And I think the responsibility's obviously fallen then on Vissa and Mbeumo, who have risen to the occasion. Damsgaard's been a player reborn this year. The one thing that sort of went against them, like for at least the first half of the season, is they were absolutely immense at home, but couldn't buy a win away from home, and were absolutely naff in that regard. They managed to fix that second half of the season to balance things out a little bit, but fair, that's good. Bournemouth, good again. I think obviously losing Solanke, sort of finding good replacement. They're very, very fun team to watch, and a lot of big teams in particular struggled against Bournemouth. I know sort of Arsenal struggled there, Man City struggled there, Chelsea struggled there, Ipswich didn't struggle there admittedly, but we'll leave that one be. That's just very, very easy on the eye. Iraola seems to have got this Bournemouth team just working, sort of very fun. And my worry with Bournemouth is the fact that they are going to get picked apart, as they've got unique, sort of top-notch individuals, which I think a lot of teams could be sniffing around. Having already lost Huijsen to Real Madrid, there's the rumours of Kerkez potentially leaving to Liverpool because of their need for a left-back. I'd be worried about Bournemouth next season, but they don't have European football, so we'll see on that one. Hey, you've got Brighton. Brighton put in a C. Like, people expect Brighton to be that good now. There's the level of expectation on Brighton to just be around those European sort of fighting in near those European places. They can just always seem to turn over. They just always seem to have some unique, amazing player that's just suddenly comes through and does an amazing job. Like this season, I think Balaba's probably arguably been that. João Pedro's been good. Hinshelwood's low-key been pretty decent. Matoma, always good. Estupinian, always good. Lewis Dunk, always reliable. It's just sort of what you expect from Brighton now. I think to go above expectations for Brighton is to see them actually getting into Europe, which is what I can say about Nottingham Forest. I'm going to put A. I'm going to put A for that. I'm going to say great season from Nottingham Forest. There was the chance of them getting the Champions League football towards the end of the season. Obviously, this final game didn't manage to get it and just about lost out, so they'll be doing Conference League. The fact that they're doing European football when a lot of people, myself included, thought they were getting relegated, relying on goals from Chris Wood, sort of playing this counter-attacking football, being so solid at the back with Milenkovic and Murillo, Elanga, Hudson-Odoi flying down the side, Gibbs White being able to dictate sort of the play and be able to sort of spring those passes. Absolutely just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. They seem to have just sort of dipped off at the wrong time, unfortunately. But I think they'll be that much stronger for it because they're a team that's not expected to be here and hadn't gone through that battle that had to have that sort of mental edge to get these European spots. Unfortunately, my worry for them next season is trying to compete on multiple fronts, playing in Europe as well as the Premier League could have a real problem sort of with that squad unless they very, very much increase the depth of that squad. I'd see them sort of slipping down into the bottom half of the table because of it, depending on how well and how long they do in that competition. Next up, we've got Aston Villa. I think it's good. I think it's B. I think it's good. Aston Villa have had to deal with Champions League football, and I think that's obviously been a slight hindrance, but it hasn't stopped them. They've sort of struggled with games post-Europe. They can sort of look at games against some of the lower teams like Ipswich as sort of points dropped, having failed to beat them at Portman Road or Villa Park. So you can argue that those are points dropped, although you could argue that Man United game was... well, I think there's some Villa fans on TalkSport that weren't best pleased with that one. But I'd say it's good because they're still in Europe. They're consistently staying in Europe. The ability to still maintain and attract players and sort of keep moving forward in a positive direction for Villa. So the players have got that much more experience playing in Europe. The squad size will increase. And I just don't see Europe next season, granted it's in a lower competition, to be as taxing on that squad because it's just a case of learning and growing and developing. My worry with Villa going into next season is potentially PSR issues, meaning they have to sell. The rumours of Emi Martinez being on his way are sort of looming, and then who knows if that's going to be enough before they can start spending again. Then up next we've got Newcastle as 5th. I think it's been a great season for Newcastle. I really do. Besides winning the Carabao Cup, Newcastle, I think that, I mean, their expectation is getting into Europe, getting into Champions League, is an absolute bonus. They've just done sort of so well, having to deal with various injuries, having to reorganise the defence, reorganise that midfield, finally getting Tonali into that midfield, and the balance of it's working perfectly. It's just chef's kiss. Like, arguably one of the most fun, one of the best midfields in the league, in my opinion. Seeming to get ridiculous output from Jacob Murphy, who seems to be the main supply line for Alexander Isak. I mean, Newcastle will still look for a right winger, but I mean, there's depth there. There is depth. And they're a team that, having been in Europe before, I don't see it being as much of an issue this sort of next season, on the basis that they actually spend some money and improve, sort of add a bit of depth into that squad, which I think in theory they can do, but I don't know enough into teams' finances to look into that. Chelsea is good. It's good because I think Chelsea have very much been an up and down season. I think towards the start of the season, there were people who were saying, oh, it's going to be a title charge. And then around Christmas, it just went a bit naff. Seemed to have a bit of a blip, but they seem to have rallied, sort of having a strong back line. Cole Palmer's form not being sort of fully sustainable throughout the season. His numbers still very good, but because of how well he did last season, the expectation was always going to be too high. Levi Colwill sort of getting more embedded into that team. Caicedo, I think, sort of grown more and more into the team. Still clearly missing a few pieces in the puzzle. A goalkeeper, potentially a striker. I can't quite be sure on the balance of that front three with Chelsea. Madueke at times has been good. Neto at times has been good. Trying to play Sancho, I don't know whether he'll move there permanently. Something just doesn't quite fit there. It's about getting the right player that's going to sort of balance that setup out in order to get the best out of those players starting. But Chelsea will inevitably probably just spend hundreds of million and throw it at the wall and hope something sticks, to be honest with you. But I guess we'll see on that one. Man City third. I think it's poor. I think it's a D. Man City's expectations is to win everything. Absolutely smash everything. And they didn't. It's simple as that. They didn't do the job in the League Cup. They got beaten by a not great in form. Real Madrid team that's not in great form. FA Cup, losing to Palace, and they genuinely had a spell that they were hot to start the season, and Haaland smashed it, sort of the goals. That's why he's still up there, because he had such a strong start to the season. Then they had sort of that middle spell where they were absolutely horrible. They were honking. It was like 12, 13 games without a win. I don't quite know how they managed to finish third. I mean, that says something about the teams around them, sort of potentially it being a lower points total sort of around those top teams. Maybe because the middle of the pack in the Premier League is starting to pick up more points. It's a great spread. But Man City, they were never in the title race. Never in the title race. And the fact that you are openly saying that, and there's sort of desperate signings in the winter transfer window, and the constant talks of potentially needing a rebuild, trying to shift Grealish, Kovacic, Gundogan, Bernardo Silva, bringing in Wirtz and all these other potential people. It's a sign of desperation. It's a sign that it's a poor season for Man City. It's not good enough. It's poor. Arsenal, it's a C. It's sort of expected. I think because Arsenal have been so consistently good, just being nearly men in the Premier League this season, they can't quite just get over that flipping line. Just get there. But they weren't. The problem is, with City dipping off, Liverpool sort of seized the opportunity, which most people would have thought was going to be Arsenal. They drew way too many games. Their points total was a little bit less this season, so they've maybe not been sort of as fully sort of on the gas. This was the opportunity for them, so it's a little bit disappointing in some respects. I know they've had sort of decent runs in several competitions, FA Cup excluded, semi-finals in the League Cup, sort of semi-finals in the Champions League, going out to a very good PSG team. A bit unlucky in that, but leave that one be. And then they were Liverpool's rivals, but they were never really rivals. I don't think people ever thought, sort of post-Christmas, that Arsenal were ever really strongly in the race. I mean, it was Liverpool's. They just built up such a lead. They've done it. They've been there. They've got the T-shirt. I just didn't ever feel like they were any real threat to Liverpool. Speaking of which, that's a great season. It's to suddenly just shift over from one manager to another. Minimal transfers. I think Chiesa and Mamardashvili back on loan at Valencia. Chiesa being a very, very bit part player. Arguably just needing to get a few more minutes here and there to try and get an actual Premier League medal. I don't know if he actually did or not in the end. And the transformation of Ryan Gravenberch into that midfielder that Liverpool needed, is absolutely brilliant. Slots just sort of slightly tweak the tactics just to try and be that bit more solid, that bit less gun-ho, bit more reliable, getting the job done. They've had injuries to the goalkeepers and sort of a few other players, and they've still managed to just ride through them without too many issues. People can say that some people have sort of dropped off a cliff and they've had form-wise and potentially might need replacing. Potentially some of the outgoings need replacing. Having to do this with three of your key starters sort of arguing over contract disputes and not having that affect their performance or the teams is absolutely incredible. So it's been an absolutely great season as far as I'm concerned. For Liverpool to kick on, obviously they will Slot will have to look to make it his own team, I think, moving forwards, and potentially having a stronger run in Europe. But I'm going to leave it there. Peace out. I will see you all later.